That night shattered my illusions of safety, ripped away the comforting veil of the familiar, and exposed the raw, chilling underbelly of the city. The encounter with the smiling man was like a virus, infecting my mind, warping my perception of reality. The world, once a playground of exploration and discovery, became a minefield of potential threats. Every corner I turned held the possibility of his reappearance. His grotesque form materializing from the shadows, that haunting smile, a prelude to unimaginable horror. Sleep became a battleground where I wrestled with his spectral image, his laughter echoing in the darkest recesses of my mind. The city exhaled a chilling mist, a spectral breath that snaked through the concrete canyons, slithering down alleyways like a wraith, and clung to me like a shroud, seeping into the very fibers of my clothes, chilling me to the core. The usual symphony of urban life, a comforting hum that had always been the soundtrack to my nocturnal wanderings. A reassuring blend of distant sirens, the rumble of late-night traffic, and the occasional burst of laughter echoing from a brightly lit bar had fallen silent, replaced by an eerie quietude that amplified every rustle of leaves, every distant siren wail, every creak and groan of the aging city, each sound a hammer blow against the silence, a discordant note in the symphony of the night. It was the witching hour, that liminal time between midnight and dawn, when shadows stretched long and distorted, taking on a life of their own, writhing and twisting like phantoms in the dim light. And the boundary between the real and the surreal seemed to dissolve into a hazy, dreamlike state, where logic and reason held no sway. Even the distant murmur of traffic on the main arteries, that constant reminder of human activity and connection, that reassuring pulse of life in the concrete jungle, had faded, leaving a void of silence that pressed against my eardrums, a suffocating blanket of anticipation that prickled my skin with unease, a silence so profound that it felt almost tangible, a heavy presence that weighed down on my shoulders, making it difficult to breathe. The streetlights, their anemic glow struggling against the encroaching darkness, cast a sickly yellow pallor over the deserted streets, their feeble illumination only serving to accentuate the inky blackness that clung to every corner and doorway like a sentient entity, waiting to consume the unwary, to swallow them whole and leave no trace. Each echoing footstep, a solitary percussion against the silence, bounced off the grimy brick walls of the deserted buildings, a constant reminder of my isolation in this urban wasteland, a desolate landscape of concrete and steel, a labyrinth of shadows and hidden dangers. The oppressive weight of the darkness bore down on me, a physical sensation that made it difficult to breathe, as if the very air were saturated with unseen menace, a palpable presence that watched my every move with predatory intent, its unseen eyes boring into my back, making me feel like a small animal caught in the gaze of a hungry predator, my every instinct screaming at me to flee, to escape the unseen danger that lurked in the shadows. A tremor, colder than the damp night air, coursed through me, raising goosebumps on my arms and sending a shiver down my spine. A primal fear that resonated deep within my bones as I turned down a particularly narrow lane, the darkness seeming to solidify, forming an impenetrable barrier between me and the familiar world. A portal to some shadowy realm where reason and logic held no sway, where the laws of nature were twisted and distorted, and the familiar became the grotesque. A stray cat, its eyes glowing like malevolent embers, materialized from the shadows, its gaze filled with an unnerving sentience that sent a primal fear coursing through my veins. A fear that echoed the fear of my ancestors, who had once hunted and been hunted by such creatures of the night. It observed me for a fleeting moment, a silent witness to my growing unease, its feline intuition sensing the impending danger before melting back into the darkness, leaving me alone with my fear. A tiny creature swallowed by the vastness of the night, a lone island in a sea of shadows, adrift in a world of unseen terrors. The air hung heavy with the scent of decaying vegetation and damp earth, a reminder of the cycle of life and death, of the inevitable decay that awaits us all, punctuated by the occasional acrid stench emanating from overflowing refuse bins, a testament to the city's hidden underbelly, a reminder of the rot that lurked beneath the veneer of civilization, a festering wound hidden beneath a glittering facade. A profound sense of isolation enveloped me, the feeling of being utterly alone in a world that had fallen silent, holding its breath in anticipation of something dreadful, something that was about to unfold, something that would forever alter my perception of the night, shattering the illusion of safety that I had always taken for granted. And then, as if summoned by my fear, as if the darkness itself had given birth to it, a figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the street. Tall and skeletal, its limbs moved with an unnatural jerkiness like a puppet animated by a malevolent force, its movements a grotesque mockery of life, a dance of death in the heart of the city. It was a man, clad in a threadbare suit that hung loosely on his gaunt frame, as if it belonged to a corpse resurrected from the grave. A specter returned to haunt the living, its presence a violation of the natural order. He moved with a grotesque grace, his movements a macabre parody of a waltz, each step punctuated by a lurching forward motion, as if he were being pulled against his will towards some unseen destination, his body a marionette controlled by unseen strings, dancing to a tune only he could hear. And that destination, it seemed, with a growing sense of dread, was me. As he drew closer, each step sending a fresh wave of panic through me, the details of his face became horrifyingly clear, illuminated by the flickering gaslight that cast long dancing shadows on the grimy pavement, transforming the familiar street into a macabre stage. His eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on some distant point in the sky, as if he were communing with unseen forces. The pupils dilated to black pools that seemed to absorb all light, reflecting nothing back but an abyss of madness, a void where reason and sanity should have resided. His mouth was stretched in a rictus grin, a grotesque mockery of a smile that revealed a row of yellowed teeth, sharp and uneven like a predator's, promising pain and suffering, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within the human heart. The skin stretched taut across his cheekbones, giving him a skeletal appearance, like a death mask animated by some unseen force, a grotesque parody of human existence, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the inevitability of death. A wave of primal fear washed over me, cold and paralyzing, turning my blood to ice and making my heart pound against my ribs like a trapped bird desperate to escape its cage. I pressed myself against the rough brick wall, my fingers digging into the crumbling mortar, hoping to become one with the shadows, to disappear into the darkness, to become invisible to the creature that was approaching, to escape the notice of the predator that had singled me out as its prey. He was close enough now that I could hear the soft shuffle of his shoes on the pavement, a counterpoint to the eerie music of the night, a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to count down the seconds to my doom, each step bringing him closer to me, closer to the moment of truth. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't see me, that he would simply pass by like a nightmare glimpsed from the corner of one's eye. A fleeting moment of terror that would fade with the morning light. But it was too late. He had seen me. He stopped dancing, his body pivoting with an unnatural fluidity that defied the laws of physics, his eyes locking onto mine with terrifying intensity, piercing the darkness like twin lasers, burning into my soul, leaving an indelible mark of fear. The smile widened, becoming a gaping maw that seemed to stretch impossibly wide, a grotesque invitation to join him in his madness, a promise of unimaginable horrors that lay beyond the veil of sanity. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct for survival, I darted across the deserted street, my footsteps echoing in the silence like gunshots, each one a desperate plea for help in the empty night, a futile attempt to summon aid from a world that seemed to have abandoned me to my fate. Reaching the other side, I risked a glance back, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my body trembling with fear. He was standing motionless, one foot in the street, mirroring my position, his gaze still fixed on the sky, that unnerving smile unwavering, a silent promise that he would not be deterred, that he would continue to hunt me until he caught me. I hurried on, my legs trembling, my lungs burning, the image of his face burned into my mind, a grotesque afterimage that refused to fade, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked within the human soul. Half a block later, I dared to look away, hoping against hope that he had vanished, a figment of my overactive imagination, a product of the fear that had taken root in my mind. But he was gone. Relief was fleeting, replaced by a surge of panic as I spotted him again. He had crossed the street, crouched slightly, seemingly facing me, his silhouette a dark stain against the dim light, his presence a palpable weight in the oppressive atmosphere. In the span of seconds, he had moved with impossible speed, defying the laws of physics, a creature of the night, unbound by the constraints of the natural world. He began to move towards me, no longer dancing, but stalking, each step deliberate and silent, like a predator closing in on its prey, savoring the terror of the hunt, relishing the fear that emanated from me like a beacon in the night. He moved with an uncanny speed, closing the distance between us in a matter of seconds, his elongated shadow stretching out before him like a grasping hand, reaching for me with long skeletal fingers, promising to drag me into the darkness, into the abyss of his madness. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat, a strangled gasp lost in the oppressive silence. My legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place by the sheer horror of his presence, my mind unable to comprehend the reality of the situation, the impossibility of his movements, the sheer malevolence that radiated from him. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned and walked away, his movements once again taking on the grotesque rhythm of his dance, as if nothing had happened, as if he had simply grown bored with toying with his prey, leaving me to stew in my terror, to contemplate the inevitability of my fate. Not wanting to turn my back on him, I watched him go, my eyes glued to his retreating figure, until he was almost swallowed by the darkness, his form fading into the shadows like a phantom. But then, he stopped, and he began to grow larger. Running back towards me, his pace accelerating with every stride, his grotesque smile widening in anticipation of my capture, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity that promised unimaginable pain and suffering. I ran. I ran with every ounce of strength I could muster, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest, my mind reeling with terror. The image of his face burned into my brain, a constant reminder of the horror that pursued me. I ran until I reached a main road, the harsh glare of the streetlights and the cacophony of traffic a welcome assault on my senses, a jarring reminder of the world I was desperately trying to cling to, a world of light and sound and movement, a world that seemed so distant now, so unattainable. I looked back, but the side street was shrouded in darkness, the smiling man nowhere to be seen. Had he vanished? Or was he simply waiting, hidden in the shadows, biding his time, savoring the anticipation of our next encounter? The city light seemed harsh and garish now, the sounds of traffic a jarring intrusion on the silence that had enveloped me. I hurried home, my senses heightened, every shadow a potential hiding place for the smiling man, every corner a potential ambush. I remained in that city for 6 months after that night, but the encounter with the dancing man had irrevocably altered my relationship with the urban landscape. The carefree confidence I once felt navigating the city's labyrinthine streets had evaporated. replaced by a gnawing anxiety that clung to me like a second skin. I never again ventured out for a solitary walk, the simple act of strolling through the city now fraught with a chilling sense of vulnerability. There was something about his face, a chilling dissonance between the vacant eyes and the grotesque smile that haunted my waking thoughts and invaded my dreams. A grotesque specter that refused to be exorcised. He hadn't seemed drunk or high, just utterly and terrifyingly broken. It was a glimpse into the abyss of human madness, a stark reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly ordinary individual. And that realization, the understanding that such profound insanity could exist so close to the surface of everyday life, that it could be encountered in the most mundane of settings, was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the entire encounter. The fear lingered long after I left that city, a phantom limb that twitched in the darkness, a cold sweat that broke out on my brow whenever I found myself alone on a deserted street at night, a constant reminder of my vulnerability, of the fragility of my existence. The memory of the smiling man, his grotesque dance, his vacant eyes, and his predatory grin remained etched in my mind, a chilling reminder of the fragility of sanity, of the thin line that separates us from the abyss. A line that I had come perilously close to crossing that night. Even now, years later, the memory of that night still sends shivers down my spine, a visceral reaction that transcends time and space, a primal fear that echoes through the corridors of my mind. The city, once my playground, now holds a sinister edge, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface, a darkness that I can never fully escape, no matter how far I run. I have learned to avoid the shadows, to distrust the silence, to fear the night, to be constantly vigilant, always on the lookout for the slightest sign of danger. And whenever I see a lone figure dancing in the distance, a cold dread grips my heart, a visceral reminder of that night, and I quicken my pace, hoping against hope that it is not him, that the smiling man has not returned to claim me, to drag me down into the depths of his madness. The encounter with the smiling man had changed me, irrevocably altering my perception of the world, leaving me with a deep-seated fear of the darkness, of the unknown, of the hidden depths of human depravity. It was a fear that I would carry with me for the rest of my life, a constant reminder of the night I stared into the abyss and the abyss stared back, a chilling testament to the fragility of the human psyche and the ever-present threat of madness.